The Roman slave market was not hidden in alleys or confined to secret courtyards. It stood in the open, woven into the very fabric of daily life. To walk through Rome was to walk through a city where freedom and bondage were bought and sold side by side. Marble temples gleamed, senators paraded with retinues of attendants, and merchants called out their prices. Yet within earshot, another kind of trade unfolded. On raised platforms, men, women, and children stood stripped of name, stripped of dignity, waiting for the call of the auctioneer. To the Romans, this was not a scandal. It was commerce. Imagine entering one of these markets. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, animals, and the metallic tang of coins clinking in purses. Rows of captives line the square. Around their necks hang placards, each one a silent inventory of their worth. Strong arms, no illness, farmer from Thrace. Greek, literate, skilled in rhetoric. Young girl, domestic work, untrained. A slave's body became a ledger, their life reduced to a list of assets and defects. Potential buyers walked past like appraisers at an art show, prodding muscles, checking teeth, demanding demonstrations of skill. Not all slaves were equal, and Rome had a hierarchy even within servitude. At the bottom were the laborers destined for fields, mines, and quarries. These men and women were purchased in bulk, often chained together in long lines. They fetched low prices, their lives considered expendable, their replacements always ensured by the endless tide of war. Above them were domestic slaves, the cooks, the cleaners, the attendants in wealthy households. They were more expensive, for they represented not just utility, but prestige. A villa staffed with dozens of servants signaled power, wealth, and Roman superiority. But the most prized were the skilled and the educated. Greek slaves, especially after Rome's conquest of Greece, were treated as treasures of intellect. Philosophers, tutors, mathematicians, and physicians were sold for sums so high they could bankrupt a lesser noble. To own such a slave was to display not just wealth, but refinement. Imagine the irony. The very men who had once taught kings and led academies were now bound in chains, teaching the children of those who conquered them. There were even specialized categories, each with its own value. Artisans who could carve marble or craft fine jewelry. Scribae, scribes trained in writing and record-keeping, essential in an empire that thrived on bureaucracy. Gladiators, trained to fight and bleed for spectacle, whose prices rose with their reputation. And concubines, girls and women chosen for beauty, their youth measured like a commodity at auction. Each body had a market niche, a demand, a fluctuating price. Rome turned human beings into an economy as complex as any trade in grain, spices, or gold. Other civilizations had slavery. The Greeks had long relied on it. In Mesopotamia, laborers had been bound to temples and kings, but Rome did something different. Rome industrialized slavery. It was not a peripheral institution. It was a machine that powered every corner of the empire. The scale was staggering. Some historians estimate that in Italy at the empire's height, 1 out of every 3 people was a slave, a society where chains outnumbered citizens. No other ancient civilization incorporated human bondage into its economy so deeply, so systematically, and with such precision. The logistics were terrifying in their efficiency. War was Rome's greatest supplier. After battles, tens of thousands of captives could be marched to markets, their chains clattering like coins spilling from a purse. Traders organized fleets to transport them across seas. Auctions in Delos, in Ephesus, in the very streets of Rome, could sell entire populations in a single day. Rome's appetite for labor was insatiable, and the machine of conquest fed it endlessly. But these markets were more than transactions. They were stages of humiliation. To stand on an auction block was to be stripped not only of freedom, but of identity. Families were separated, children torn from mothers, husbands from wives, as buyers selected individuals like livestock. For the sellers and buyers, it was business. For the enslaved, it was the collapse of entire worlds. The economic ripple was profound. Free laborers struggled, for how could they compete with workers who cost only a one-time fee and no wages? Small farmers were ruined as vast estates, latifundia, swallowed up land, their fields worked by gangs of cheap, replaceable slaves. The wealth of Rome tilted sharply toward the elite, those who could afford not just armies of soldiers, but armies of servants. This imbalance was hidden behind the marble shine of Roman prosperity, but it seeded unrest that would echo for centuries. To the Romans, slavery was not questioned. It was natural. The gods themselves, they claimed, had ordained a hierarchy of masters and servants. Philosophers like Aristotle rationalized it, calling some people slaves by nature. In Rome, this belief became law. Slaves were property, objects to be inherited, traded, punished, or freed at the whim of their owner. Their existence was codified not in terms of humanity, but in terms of utility. And yet, beneath the machinery, one can sense the unease. For why did Romans fear revolts so deeply? Why did they tell stories of ghosts haunting estates where slaves had suffered? Why did they whisper about men like Spartacus, who dared to break his chains? If slavery was so natural, why did its shadow loom so darkly over Rome's conscience? The slave market was more than commerce. It was a mirror reflecting both the empire's grandeur and its brutality. It showed Rome's wealth, its hunger for labor, its hunger for control. But it also revealed Rome's fragility, the dependence on millions whose silence was enforced only by fear. Rome perfected the art of slavery, refining it into a machine that touched every life, every industry, every household. But perfection in cruelty carries a price. And as the silver flowed, as the markets thrived, as chains multiplied across provinces, a silent question grew louder in the heart of the empire. How long can a civilization endure when it is built upon the broken backs of its own people?